Well, I've had the pleasure of visiting your company a number of times over the last year or so and talking about total leadership.
Thank you for doing so.
Well, it's been a thrill for me. What's been the upshot of the time that we've spent together down in Austin working on total leadership as an element of your evolving culture?
Well, Total Leadership is a very radical book because it's the only book I've ever read on work-life balance, which actually says you can have it all. It doesn't create this anxiety where you're thinking, I have to spend more time at home, and I should feel bad about the time that I'm spending at work. And I think that a lot of work-life balance books do that. They create this high anxiety situation. Instead, it asks you, how can you intelligently design your life, your job, where your performance at your company actually increases while your performance in other areas increases as well, self and community and family. And that's the brilliance of it. So I read it, as you know, as one of your first readers, and I thought everybody in the company can benefit from this because for me, it reminded me of the radical transformation I had as a leader when I held my daughter in my arms and thought, boy, I better get very prioritized now. I can't waste time like I used to waste time now. I've got to get really focused on what matters at work and what's high impact at work so I can spend time with this beautiful being, right? This beautiful person that we've brought to life. And it was just an amazing moment. And a lot of our people in our company are young. You know, they're 26 or 27. They're not at that moment yet. And so I want to get them in that moment of radical prioritization, radical focus on really what matters. And overall, if they're a happier person overall, then it'll lead to higher retention, it'll lead to less burnout, it'll lead to more evolution of our culture, and that's what the experiments are all about. So one of the experiments that I did personally with Total Leadership was I realized that I have a tendency, a weakness, if you will, to want to be the hero in a sales call, to want to be the guy marching in that gets the deal done. And as you scale to a 400-person company, that's a very hard weakness because by definition as a CEO, your job becomes more operational. Doesn't mean you shouldn't go on very important sales calls, but you should be very, very disciplined in the ones you do go on because time spent out of the office is time spent not coaching the executive team, not focusing on operations.
So to be doing sales makes you too operational or not enough focused on sort of leading the operation?
Taking yourself out of the office so frequently to go visit New York, visit this prospect on site, distracts you from operations because you're not physically there to focus on it and you're worried about planes, trains, and automobiles. So the experiment that I did was I realized that that's a weakness of mine, that I'll very quickly raise my hand and go, march into the sales call and get the deal. But I really asked myself, is it really me that's getting it done? Like, would we have got it if I didn't go? So a meeting was coming up where we were going to present to the CEO of Oriental Trading and his executive team staff. And he's a friend of mine. I serve on the board of directors with him at shop.org. And I called him up 2 days prior, and I said, Sam, I just can't make it. I've got too many things operationally I'm focused on. But let me tell you why I think you should do this. It's going to drive sales for you, et cetera. We had a 20-minute conversation. And then I told the sales director that was going on site, Scott, I'm not going with you. Right? I've got too many things going on. You're going to be just fine on your own.
Gulp.
And that's what he said. It was gulp, and he knew that that was a very important moment for him. He went on site, he aced it, we got the sale. That would have taken me out of the office for 2 days, right? Now, this person's a friend of mine. I could have easily justified it. We would have gotten the sale, which would have been self-reinforcing to me, saying, well, I'm glad I took that trip. So I reduced my travel dramatically. I travel about 40% of the time now, which is still, that's a lot of travel.
But compared to...
for a 400-person company of 360 clients globally, 40% travel That's actually pretty light, right? That's pretty manageable. And I empower and trust a lot of other people to be in the field. Now, how did that help me as a total leader? Well,
Yes.
I could spend more time on community, which I'm very involved with mentoring entrepreneurs in Austin, and they're the job engine for Austin. So that's my big focus in community. And I'm also very focused on nonprofits. I could spend more time with my family, so I was much happier in that. I could spend more time with my executive team, right? So focused on operations. And I could spend more time on myself. So I added yoga into my routine because when I did my self-assessment, I determined that that was one area where I've always been frustrated that I'm not flexible. I started programming when I was 7 years old, so I grew up literally in this position, my entire life.
You started programming on computers when you were 7 years old.
When I was 7 years old, and so I grew up like that in a very, awkward position.
Super geek.
Super geek, and so I needed to create more flexibility in my body, and I could feel that lack of flexibility was aging me faster. And I did one of these real age tests at a gym, and they said, your strength, you're 37, but you feel like you're 31 because you're strong. You work out a lot, but they're like, your flexibility makes you feel like you're 37 because you have none. You have almost no flexibility. You're like a tightly wound band. So that less travel allowed me to focus and integrate yoga into myself. So I won on all areas just with that one simple change. And then that person, Scott, now he's the hero, right? I didn't take away any of the glory from him. He went on site, and he can tell that story. Like, hey, I presented to the whole executive team at Oriental Trading. My CEO left me to do that at the last minute, and I knocked it out of the park, right? So he's got that feeling. So
Increased
it's actually more empowering for him. And I think that anybody's strengths become their weaknesses. I think that's the part of total leadership is that, yes, it's a strength for me being on site and selling someone.
Sure.
But that's also a weakness if I only do that to the exclusion of everything else in the company's operations. And you have to stay balanced on everything that matters in the company as a CEO, not just that one area.
Well, that's a great example. We're fast running out of time here, unfortunately, Brett. So let me ask you about something that I find most admirable in your commitment to leadership, and that is your passion for learning. And you're continually soaking up new ideas, new practices, new knowledge. How did that come to be a part of your repertoire of skills? Because it seems to me that you represent a really good example of someone who is dedicated to always getting better as a leader and seeing it as something that you can continually develop over the course of your life.
Well, thank you. And I would say that, coming to Worden, my biggest strength was that I had been programming on the computer since I was 7. So I had the ability to create a lot of things from a technology standpoint. But that also became my biggest weakness because to create anything meaningful and large scale, you need people, right? And you need to trust people. And that strength, if you're so good at that one thing, makes you want to jump in and always do that and not trust that other people can do even better than you at that one thing. And so what happened was I went to Worden. I didn't pay a lot of attention in your class at that time. And
I think I remember that, Brett.
That I called you up a year afterwards and I said, hey, I'm drowning in management and really trying to learn this trial by fire. I'm reading a lot of books. Would you mentor me? And I read about 200 books, when I was a 26-year-old CEO at Coremetrics over the next 2 years, the first 2 years of starting it, to try to absorb a lot of information. I sought out a lot of mentors. I always seek out a lot of mentors. I'm always looking for someone that knows a lot more, has been at a much higher level than me, that can teach me how they got from where I'm at today to where they are. I'm always asking for help. I'm always reading. I'm always reinventing, deconstructing, and reconstructing myself because, frankly, that's what leadership requires. I really try to discourage people from management. I say, look, if you want to be the Michelangelo of coding for your whole life and you feel comfortable with that, you should do that, right? You should absolutely do that and not feel anxiety about it. But if you want to create impact on a global scale, you want to be a leader, you want to lead a team, you want to be responsible for someone, don't do it for the wrong reasons. Don't do it so you can walk around and tell your friends you have a team of 50. Do it because you really care about mentoring those people. Do it because you really care about developing yourself as a leader, and constantly turn to the wisdom of others, constantly turn to books, to mentors, like yourself, to engage with, and really find if you're developing and centered. And that's a constant journey. There is no nirvana. There is no time where I'm going to sit back and think, I have become a total leader. That will never happen.
Me neither.
And I get mentored by people that are 60 years old that have founded Fortune 500 companies. They haven't reached that level.
Right.
They never will.
They're continually searching.
Yeah, and that's the whole process. And there is a point though where I realized that I learned enough about entrepreneurship where the student had become the teacher to a lot of people, and that I remember that moment. I remember sitting and thinking, hey, I'm spending most of my time now teaching, and that was a beautiful thing as well, because now the spirit of entrepreneurship, the helping each other, the American spirit of invention is very alive and well. And people will help you if you ask them. They'll see in themselves, or in you, what they saw in themselves maybe 10 years ago.
But people are afraid to ask for help. Don't you? I mean, your example here of seeking out help and when you needed it, when you were facing difficulties, it stands against this, the sort of classic model of the individual, against all odds, making it on his own. What is it that gives you the courage to be able to ask for help when you need it?
Well, this is a paradox of leadership, because I think leaders are told, don't show weakness, right? The way you walk through the halls, very much sets the tone. I've been told that before, right? And that is the common belief. And the reality is that we're all wired the same way as human beings. We all realize that we're not perfect, that there's always areas that we can improve upon, and the hubris of leadership to believe that you have it all figured out. Nobody's got it all figured out. There is no nirvana. And so the asking for help a lot of times will alarm you of an area where you're really off kilter. It's like the conversations you and I have over dinner, as you mentor me, where I come back and I think, wow, I really need to start doing this better. And it really hits me hard in my gut. That's a very good, it's a very unnerving feeling, but it's a very good feeling at the end of the day, because it does directly improve me. And
you're open
improve
to
my ability.
Right, and that's what makes it possible for you to continue to learn. And yet is that something that you learned growing up, or is it something that you figured out sometime along the way that you needed to be able to do, to be able to be open to coaching and feedback and data that was going to jar you into experimenting with new ways of getting things done?
It's something that I learned along the way, and there were a lot of hard knocks. One of the reasons I come back and I speak here, outside of the fact that I'm paying it back to people that came to speak when I was a student, is that it allows me to intensely focus and reflect on what I learned since I graduated, and what can I teach people that were in my shoes 10 years ago. And just that process is a process of self-discovery that's not unlike the essay writing process to get admitted to Wharton in the first place. It's a very radical focus on self-discovery. I think that's healthy.
Indeed. Brett, we're going to have to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your insights and your observations and reflections on your life and career so far. We're all going to be watching to see what happens next.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Stu. It's a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on Total Leadership TV. See you next time.